My name is Mary Norman, and I'm president of the Auburn Heritage Association. I've been the president for the last 13 years. The Auburn Heritage Association was formed in 1974 by Miss Alice Carey Pitt Gibson. My family has been here for 7 generations, and I live in Auburn's oldest house, built in 1835, and it was built by my 4th great uncle. I was born here, but I didn't grow up here. But when I came back to go to college, my grandmother gave me the love of family history. I have probably over 100 family members that are buried at Pine Hill Cemetery that go all the way back to my 4th great grandfather. I just love learning about Auburn and Auburn's history. It's very important to me.
And now I'd like to introduce you to some of our Lantern Tour characters that have portrayed characters for us that we feel are significant to Auburn's history. Sam Hendricks became a part of the association and the Pine Hill Lantern Tour because we were short on actors. So he was asked to portray John Frazier Hurd. Amanda Bain went to the Lantern Tour during college and saw the character that she now portrays. She thought it would be a really fun thing to do, so she was able to ask for a spot on the tour, and she's done a wonderful job. Flora, Dr. Hendricks asked her if she would portray her character Gadsby Rice because he thought she would be perfect for the part, and she was.
In 1996, the Auburn Heritage Association decided to take on the project of helping to restore Pine Hill Cemetery. Pine Hill Cemetery is Auburn's oldest cemetery. It was given to the city by its founder, Judge John J. Harper, in 1837. Ironically, it was his first son who was buried there in 1838. In 1996, to be able to raise money to help build the wall, the fence, and do various other different projects within the cemetery, the Auburn Heritage Association decided to do a Pine Hill Lantern Tour, which would have characters portrayed of various different people who are buried in the cemetery. So much of Auburn's history is in that cemetery. You have 5 university presidents who are buried there. You have numerous professors, mayors, doctors, ministers, and whatnot who helped found the city of Auburn. And as a result, the first tour, people came out in droves. They had, I understand, over 800 people come through the cemetery that night. And it's from that point on that the Heritage Association decided that this was the best way to educate young people and adults on what the early history of Auburn was really all about.
I went to an event they held last year on Veterans Day and joined as a member. They knew I had some time and some interest, and so they invited me to be part of the board for this year. Well, I had not originally planned to portray a character, but we had a couple of folks drop out, so we were in need of somebody to stand in, and so the president asked if I would portray one of those characters, and I agreed to do that. I'm really not an actor, but it was really fun, so I'm glad I got to do it. My character was John Frazier Hurd, who goes back 100 years or more in Auburn. He was actually in his 20s when the Civil War broke out, living over in Georgia, signed on to the Confederate Army, was wounded at Gettysburg, and really should not have survived that, but he did. Came back home, and shortly after that, that was in the 1860s, Auburn had been established about 30 years earlier, and his family had heard about the new settlement over here, the farming opportunities and the education that had been established in Auburn, and the entire bunch of them decided to pack up from Georgia, move over here, buy some land, and continue their careers as farmers and that kind of thing. So the entire group of Hurds moved over to Auburn. He ended up being a pretty large landowner, John Frazier Hurd did, and he owned a few hundred acres over near what is now Hurd Avenue. And when Auburn's original college building, Old Main, burned and plans were made to rebuild that building, that was 1888 when the new building was constructed. Plans were made to put a clock tower in that, as well as a bell in the other tower. And so they asked John Frazier Hurd if he could be the guy to put in place the clock and the clock tower, the faces of the clock, as well as the bell in the other tower of what we now call Sanford Hall. And he was able to do that. He had a portable steam hoist that I presume he used in his farm work. They were able to use that to lift the pieces of the clock, the faces of the clock, and more heavily, the bell. The bell weighed like 4,200 pounds. So, a real monumental effort to get that bell into place, but they did it, and it's still there. Well, I was a little nervous going out there being an actor, but it really was fun, and you get the sense that the people that were coming by really enjoyed the stories. All of us had a 2 or 3 minute little talk that we would give, and we could ad-lib on that. But it gave me a chance to portray this guy that really accomplished a lot of things a long time ago, but whose influence on Auburn is still with us today. And I think that would be the same for the other characters as well. They're portraying people whose influence in Auburn is still valid today. And it gave us a chance to teach people or remind people of who a handful of our originating characters were.
The Lantern Tour is one of my favorite things in Auburn ever. And so I went as a college student through the tour, and I saw my character and I fell in love with her, and I said, I don't know how to get involved in this, but I want to get involved in this, I have to. And so through that and through working with the Auburn Heritage Association, I was able to kind of wiggle myself into the position that I love, Miss Virginia Goss Howell. Okay, well, Miss Virginia Goss Howell, the story started back in around 1850 in Auburn. Her mama ran a boarding house on Magnolia Avenue where McDonald's is today. And there was a boarder there by the name of Mr. William Howell, and he was much older than Miss Virginia. Miss Virginia was only 15. And her mama said, Virginia, you ain't got no business trying to marry yourself no older man, and especially not no newspaper man, because you know what they say about them. But she didn't care. They got married anyway. They moved right next door to their mama by McDonald's, and they lived happily ever after for 1 whole year. Because after that, Miss Virginia got tragically sick and died mysteriously. So her husband was so heartbroken that he buried her in the front yard of her mama's house, right where McDonald's is today. It's crazy. So he erected this beautiful big tombstone over her with a weeping willow on it, and he grieved there every day, but not for long, because her mama had been right, and men's hearts are very fickle. So not very long after that, he started courting her older sister, and the only way that they could get married is if her sister would agree to it, for him to dig up Miss Virginia from the front yard. So she's actually been transplanted from McDonald's, basically, to the Pine Hill Cemetery. So she is definitely a woman who has something to weep about. And the moral of the story is always listen to your mama, and don't you ever trust an older man. And I just love her. I love her, I love her story, and I love all the excitement and joy that it brings to the people of Auburn when they hear it.
I played the part, the character of, Gadsden Wright, and she was born a slave in New Orleans, and her grave is the only marked grave, you know, of a black person that's buried at Pine Hill Cemetery. And however, you know, I guess by her being the only black that was buried there, you know, she represents all the other black slaves, you know, that was buried there, you know, before the 1870s. And then it's a lot of black slaves that was buried in the old Baptist Hill Cemetery, you know, until they opened up the new one. I worked it as a nurse for Miss Alicia Milton, you know, doing, you know, the wall, and I worked for her until the end of the wall. And you know, after I was freed, I worked it hard as being a centrist, and then I ended up, you know, opened up my own boarding house, you know, downtown. And I worked it real hard, and then by me being a centrist, I ended up back there then, all, you know, the college boys, they wore uniform. So, you know, I'm the one that, you know, sewed their uniform for them. And I also was a cook, and the boys, you know, liked my cooking. And back, you know, they said that I died. It was a white man who admired my courage and stuff. So he, you know, he ejected my tombstone, you know, back there then. And so I'm the only one that has, you know, a Head Start tombstone that's over there, you know, in Pine Hill Cemetery. I was a little bit nervous at first, but this is my second time. After that, you know, kind of, you know, enjoyed doing that part is, you know, getting right. And I learned a little bit about her. And, you know, they told me that, oh, everybody just thought I did so good, you know, but I thought I was so nervous. But they say, you know, I did good. So as you do it more and more, you know, you get a little less comfortable with it. But I kind of enjoyed it, you know, doing it. Yeah.
One of the first projects of the Auburn Heritage Association was the restoration of this house called the Scott Yarborough House, or in other words, also called Pebble Hill. It is now the Auburn University Center for Arts and Humanities, named for Caroline Marshall Drawn. This house was built in 1847 by Colonel Nathaniel Scott, who was one of the earliest settlers of Auburn. Colonel Scott built this house in 1847. It is a typical Greek Revival house. It's hand-hewn. It's put together with mortise and tenon and pegs. Colonel Scott and his wife lived here in the house on a 100-acre plantation. And it was in 1974 that the Auburn Heritage Association purchased it from the Yarborough family in 1974 and started its restoration. It is one of the only remaining Greek Revival houses that is left here in Auburn. I think there are only about 5. The second project that the Auburn Heritage Association took on was to restore the Ebenezer Baptist Church. It is just down the street here from the Scott Yarborough House. It is the first African American church built for African Americans, built around the 1870s. Leonatus Warren Payne, a white man, gave the land for the church, but most of the church was built by African Americans. The Ebenezer Baptist Church was placed on the National Register in 1978, and a historic marker was placed there in 1974. The Auburn Heritage Association then sold the church to the Universalist Church, and is still using it today as a church and community center. The next project for the Auburn Heritage Association was the removal of the Nun Winston House on North Gay. As coming around in the late 80s, many of Auburn's older homes were being destroyed or demolished for Auburn's progress. And as a result, the Heritage Association was notified that the Nunn Winston House would soon be demolished. It was donated to Auburn Heritage Association and then was removed to Kiesel Park. In 1978, the Auburn Heritage Association took on two major projects. That was to place two areas of the city of Auburn on the National Register. One was the Auburn University District. The other project was to place the North Main Street area on the National Register. It is now known as the North College Street Historic District. And there were approximately 25 houses that were placed on the National Register in 1978.
We feel the Auburn Heritage Association is important to the community overall because we try to preserve its history. We feel as though it's very important for Auburn's history to be a part of the community, and we feel as though we should honor those ancestors that came here before us.